Hi, my name is Elle, and Danae would like some more information about how we play Bookopoly. So as a reminder, we did not come up with this idea. This is from Becca, and she came up with this idea. We just made some modifications to it, particularly so that the board fits us and also so that we can play together. We made this a two-player game. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is print out a blank Monopoly board. And then you're going to take some markers or crayons or something like that and color in the little squares in the appropriate places. Just pull up a picture of a Monopoly board and go from there. Next, you're going to fill in all of your prompts. I will make another video about what the prompts are, what prompts we used, what prompts Becca recommends, stuff like that. I'll make a whole separate video on that. But as for the rules, because typically you're going to want to know the rules before you invest in making the whole darn thing. So just like Monopoly, you start on go, you work your way around the board by rolling 2 6-sided dice. If you don't have dice, that's okay. They have online dice rollers. You can do that. So when you start on go, you roll your 6-sided dice, you move that number of squares, and then you are going to read a book that fills the prompt of that square. So let's take our imaginary first roll, okay? So I started on go, I rolled a 7. So I move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I landed on chance. That was my actual first roll. And so for chance, there are the 2 little card stacks. One is for chance and one is for community chest. Community chest, instead of doing like a deck of cards for these, we decided to make little TBR jars because we have cats and kids and they're going to knock my deck of cards over and I'm not going to be able to keep them straight. So instead we made little jars for both community chest and for chance. That way everything stays contained. So community shelf, I'm sorry, it's called community shelf in this game instead of community chest like it's called in Monopoly. So the community shelf is a list of different book genres that you are interested in reading. So I looked up a list online and I only picked ones that I'm actually interested in reading. I'm not going to read an art history book. I'm sorry, I'm just not. So I didn't put that in my jar. So don't feel like you have to do everything. Pick ones that you like. Traditionally, these decks have 16 cards each, so I did choose 16 different genres to put in my jar. For chance, it is slightly different. I went to my bookshelf upstairs and I pulled out like, I think 18 or 20 books that I have not read yet that are already on my shelf. And I stuck those in this jar. I did the same for Rogue Potato. I pulled a lot more for him because he was like, just do this whole shelf. I haven't read anything on it. And so his was closer to like 30 of them. But unlike in the game of Monopoly, we're not going to be putting these back as we use them. So it's okay if you go over, okay? So that is how community shelf and chance work. So the book that I pulled from my chance jar was The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels. So once I am done reading that book, I will get to roll again and move further on the board. So let's say that the next book that I roll a 5 and I end up on a new book. So that's a book that has come out fairly recently. So I choose off of my shelf Bookshops and Bone Dust. Now with chance, because we have our own separate jars, we're not going to be doing this for that particular square, but for a new book, if I read Bookshops and Bone Dust, what I'm going to do is I'm going to print out a little version of the cover and I am going to paper clip it to that spot on the game board. And I need to make these a little bit smaller. But I'm going to paper clip it there. And the reason for that is because as Rogue Potato is moving around the board, if he also lands on this square and I've already read a book that fills that prompt, then he's going to read this same book. And that way we're both kind of reading the same books and we can talk about them and things like that, but we don't feel like we're forced to like, oh my gosh, I just finished this book. You have to read it. It's more of like, hey, you landed on it. So like, here's your next read. And the other thing is, so let's say I land on this multiple times before he happens to land on it. There might be a stack of 2 or 3 books here. So at that point, when he lands on it, he gets to choose what it is he's going to want to read. And so as he's reading books, he is also going to be clipping the book covers of the books he reads around the board. And then I will be reading those books. This works really well for us because we have very similar taste in books, but we don't tend to choose the same books right out the gate. So our libraries have similar themes and similar genres and things like that, but we don't tend to just pick up a book off the shelf that's the same for the most part, if that makes sense. So the next thing I want to talk about is what happens when you roll doubles. In the original version of Becca's Bookopoly, what she has you do is you decide at the beginning of the month how many books you think you can read in that month, and then you do that many rolls right off the bat, and you choose your books at the beginning of the month. I don't like that for a few different reasons. One of the reasons being, I don't know how many books I'm going to get to. Sometimes I blaze through books and I can read like 10 books in a month, and other times I only get to like 3 or 4. So let's say that you decide to go with her version and you want to decide your books up front. If you roll doubles, the way that she has the rule go is you add an extra book. So if you decided at the beginning of the month you were going to read 4 books, but one of those rolls was a double, then you roll for 5 books and you try to finish 5 books that month. So for me, that's really stressful. I don't like that. And so we have decided instead that we are only going to roll once we finish our previous book. So for Rogue Potato's first roll, he did roll a 6, 2 3s. So he did roll doubles and he landed on humans. So that means a human is the main character of the book. Because he rolled doubles in Monopoly, you roll and you go again. So then he rolled and he ended up over here on hyped. So the way that we're playing it is he has to take both of these prompts and find a book that fits both. So he has to find a book with a human main character that has been hyped and talked about a lot on social media and things like that. So he is not a social media person, so I did help him. I went through his library and I was like, hey, here are all of the books that I have seen being talked about a lot on Book Talk that also have human main characters. And then he was able to narrow it down and pick from there. So that's the way that we are playing rolling with doubles. And the way that would play with the book cover is because he's not going to leave the book cover in 2 different places. He's going to leave it on the hyped square because that is where he ended up at the end of his turn, so to speak. And we do keep track of that with little magnetic bookmarks. So his little magnetic bookmark stays on hyped while he is reading that book, and then it'll get replaced with the book cover as he moves on to his next roll. And then I have a little pink donut one. So yeah, that's how we keep track of where we are on the board and what books we've read and things like that. I think those are the big things that we changed about how the game is played. Other than that, it's pretty standard. You're moving around the board and following the prompts. Like I said, we did make some serious changes to some of the prompts, not all of them. So I will make a separate video talking about the changes that we made and why we made those changes. A lot of them is because we're playing with 2 people and also because he's not a social media person. So some of the prompts just really didn't make sense for him personally. So we just altered them, and that's fine. If you don't like any of the, like, you can make your own prompts, like make them your own, make them fit what you want to be reading. Anyway, so that's what I've got. I hope you like it. Print out your own board and let's play.